food and beverage firms are expecting higher costs and will review their operations as higher wage requirements for workers kick in. From July, entry-level wages under the progressive wage model will rise by $140 to $2,220. Nadirah Zaidi with more.
Food services workers, including food or drink stall assistants, cooks and waiters, are getting higher starting salaries from July. Over 53,000 full-time and part-time workers will benefit from the new progressive wage model tripartite agreement with the Manpower Ministry. NTUC's Assistant Secretary General says negotiations this time round was really quite hard, but it's a significant move partly due to the challenging economic times.
I do think that with this, there is better clarity on where our workers are when it comes to them looking at their career pathways as well as their wage increments. I think this is particularly significant during this period where a lot of employers are facing cost increments. And so because of this, we are very, very grateful for the employers for doing this.
Baseline monthly wages will continue to rise by up to 145 Singapore dollars each year for the next 3 years, reaching $2,500 by 2028. Workers say this helps them cope with the rising cost of living.
Semuanya naik, kan kita pasti kecewa lah, apa-apa naik ya kan. Barang semuanya mahal, apalagi kalau kita gaji kecil kan ya. Jadi kita kan mau apa ya? Singapura apa-apa kan mahal beli, anak mau sekolah, mau ini, mau itu, ya kan?
Companies welcome the wage increases but say they must urgently review their business models amid global uncertainties and tighter consumer spending.
Are we well staffed at every single day part, or are we staffed too much at certain day parts and therefore I need to streamline? These are the things that people really need to start thinking about, because if there's excess inefficiencies, they have to get more efficient in those areas so they can put all the resources in times where they can serve the customers.
With the ongoing war in the Middle East and rising cost of doing business, the government is also monitoring the situation before making any decisions.
It's very difficult to make assessments now, given the fact that we haven't quite assessed the full impact of what does it mean to Singapore given what's happening in the Middle East. Whether or not would prices go up, we can't quite tell. So would it be short-lived and therefore things goes back to normal? Would it be prolonged? Therefore, there could be some degree of inflation that we could see as we have seen years before.
Workers will also have access to more training to help them upskill and to seize new opportunities.
F&B workers benefiting from the new progressive wage model agreement won't be getting the same increases as before. Food and drink stall assistants, for example, who are paid the least, will see their monthly gross wages rise by almost 7%. That's represented by the blue line. That includes their basic wage and other cash payments like allowances and overtime. Under the first wage agreement, it was up by a maximum of over 9%. When compared to the rest of the sector's basic wage increases, represented by the red line, it's higher than the sector's overall growth.
We do think, the 140 to 145 levels that were negotiated for was something that our unions were very pragmatic about. We do understand that there's actually very tough economic times coming, and I do believe this is when the tripartite works together to ensure that everybody looks at sustainable wage growth as well as productivity growth.
And for more, we're joined on Zoom by Associate Professor Ong Yi Ching from the Department of Economics at NUS. She's also co-director of the Social Service Research Centre. Prof. Ong, good to have you with us. Now, the progressive wage model for the food services sector, that will raise the baseline pay over the next 3 years. Now, from an economic perspective, how critical is this move and also the timing of it?
So given that this is government legislation, the government has to update it regularly. Ideally, it should be automated, right, to at least keep up with inflation. The last couple of years, core inflation actually has been fairly low, about 1.2, 1.4% in the last few months. But of course, with the war in the Middle East, it's hard to predict what might happen. So this might be a little sort of forward-looking, which is great, right? And I think also to recognize that it is very likely that these workers who provide very valuable essential services, they have arguably been underpaid for a long time. So in that sense, it is welcome. We all eat out a lot, and these workers are critical to our experience dining out.
Now, one of the biggest challenges in the food services sector is manpower shortages. Can these higher wages under the PWM meaningfully help to ease this problem?
It's hard to say. I think it really depends on, what the workers' outside options are, right? So if they are also employed in industries under the PWM, for example, then it also, to some degree, depends on what those increases in the sectors are. And of course, it goes beyond just wages alone. You know that working in the food services industry is not an easy job, right? You're on your feet a lot. It's very physical. The hours are long and they're not entirely, conducive to a family life. If you're working in a restaurant on the night shift, right, by the time you get home, it's maybe close to midnight. So in that sense, you can probably understand why some people who might appreciate more flexibility, maybe they have young children or they have elderly parents to care for, they might prefer something like a gig job, which offers them more autonomy in terms of setting their hours.
Now, even with better wages, do you think the sector can attract more Singaporeans into these jobs? And what more do you think might be done to help to encourage that?
I think maybe a more predictable work schedule, maybe, and of course, we would want to have reliable, trained workers. So if there are ways to offer them good training and good support, such that, and probably sufficient flexibility in their job scope, which obviously can be difficult from the business owner's perspective also. I think given that employees, all else equal, would also like to stick to their jobs, right? So yeah, I think definitely opportunities for career progression, right? Bosses and co-workers who are understanding and can have a good environment going, then that'll be great. We also realize that from the business owners' perspectives, it's not so easy. Cost of labor has been going up. And of course, the government announced an increase in the qualifying salary for employment pass holders, S-pass holders, as well as the local qualifying salary for these workers, right? So again, recognizing that these workers, their wages are set not necessarily by how productive they are, but by how competitive it is and how easy it is to hire people who are willing to work at these wages.
Yeah, and speaking
and
speaking of which, maybe you can tell us a bit more also about how these wage increases actually affect the food businesses. Is it going to help them with that manpower issue, or will the costs eventually start to stack up for them as well?
I think the costs going to stack up. I mean, we know that in the food services industry, we're very, very, very heavily reliant on non-Singaporeans, right? That much is true because these, again, long hours, physical, arduous task, and the wages are not very high. So if we think about it from a business owner's perspective, what options do I have? I need workers, I need labor. They can either be Singaporeans or non-Singaporeans. And of course, the government is making sure that the Singaporean workers are not getting underpaid, right? Their wages are not being suppressed by the lower wages that non-Singaporeans are willing to accept. Now, I could switch to capital. You can think about, say, robot waiters or machines or systems. And then we think about who is able to switch to capital. It's going to be the bigger companies, the chains, the franchises who have deep pockets, and they have a large enough customer base that it makes sense for them to switch from labor to capital. Right. And then my concern is that this is going to start squeezing out the small businesses, the mom and pop shops, right? With maybe small coffee shop with enough for table seats for 10 people. They are not going to be able to switch to capital so easily. It might not make financial sense for them to do so. And at the end of the day, if we think about what the goal of this is, right? So clearly the government is looking out for workers. They want to ensure that workers get paid a certain wages that are commensurate with their productivity and their service. But if you look at businesses, what are some of the largest cost drivers besides labor? is going to be rent, right? It's the cost of leasing that space to run your restaurant. So over 200 years ago, David Ricardo pointed out that rent is really the surplus extracted by landlords. And these landlords, it's not as if they're exerting, a lot of effort, or they're putting in a lot of labor, or they're being very innovative. They are getting these rents purely due to their ownership of these scarce resources, the land. Right. So if you think about what we want to do, we want to make sure that workers are getting paid sufficiently high wages, right? That is enough for a dignified living. And we want to also make sure that consumers are not paying unduly high prices, right? Consumers don't like it. So if we can find some way to actually go towards more of this, what's really happening with, let's say, the hawker centers, some of the hawker centers,
right.
where there is collective ownership over these, the business places, the restaurants, the coffee shop spaces. And then we can ensure that rent is not excessively high. And businesses, the restaurants, the coffee shops, they are going to be competing with each other to provide good quality at attractive prices.
Yeah, thank you so much,
right, so I
for
think that's
sharing
really
your
where we
insights
need
with
to be
us today.
thinking.
Unfortunately, we've run out of time for this segment, but we really do appreciate your insights. I've been chatting with Associate Professor Ong Yi Ching from the Social Service Research Centre at NUS.